I couldn't believe my eyes as I stood outside my front door, muttering to myself in disbelief. After a grueling day at work, I returned home only to find my personal belongings scattered haphazardly in front of the entrance, as if they had been tossed out without a second thought. The door itself seemed to have transformed, stubbornly resisting all my attempts to unlock it. It was the last straw in a series of trials I had endured while living with my in-laws. With a firm resolve, I decided that I would never set foot in that house again. I gathered my scattered possessions, packed them into my car, and resolved to return to the comfort and familiarity of my parents' home. Months passed in silence until, quite unexpectedly, I received a message from my estranged in-laws, rekindling a connection I had long thought was lost. Hello, my name is Maya. I'm 31 years old, and my husband Rowan is 5 years younger than me. I was deeply invested in my career, and Rowan was a subordinate at work. Marriage had never been on my radar, and I wasn't particularly interested in settling down, especially since I had never really dated before. However, Rowan's persistent pursuit won me over. He promised that I could continue focusing on my career while he handled all the household chores himself. His commitment intrigued me, making the idea of marriage seem more appealing. Though I'd never been enthusiastic about marriage, the idea of having children occasionally crossed my mind. As I approached 33, I realized that if I wanted to start a family, I needed to act soon. So, I decided to marry Rowan. Initially, it was just the two of us, and true to his word, he supported my career and took on most of the household responsibilities. However, our lives took an unexpected turn about 5 months into our marriage. My father-in-law passed away suddenly, leaving my mother-in-law and my younger sister-in-law, Quinn, who is 30, in a state of shock. They claimed they couldn't manage on their own. Though Quinn is a graphic designer with a decent income, her focus on fan activities meant that her financial stability was not as strong as it could be. Whenever Quinn came to talk to me with my mother-in-law, I often felt she should consider a full-time job. One day, Rowan suggested a new idea. Maya, have you thought about moving in with my mom and sister? You can continue freelancing, and having them around would help with the household chores even more. What do you think? I responded, Rowan, I'm okay with keeping up my work, but I'm not sure about taking on more household chores. If your mom moves in and we're helping her, shouldn't she handle most of the household tasks? Isn't that fair? Rowan agreed, saying, I'll talk to my mom and sister about it. Please consider the idea of living together. I'll wait for their response. I told Rowan that I had my own life and financial concerns to think about, and that I wanted to ensure everything was carefully planned. While it might sound harsh, caregiving needs a lot of planning. Rowan assured me that his family would handle the household chores, and though I thought about asking for a written agreement, I decided against it. They were family, and I trusted they would keep their word. So, we moved into my husband's family home. On our first day, I went to greet my mother-in-law. I said, I'm looking forward to living together. As Rowan might have mentioned, I'll continue with my work, so I hope you and Quinn can manage the household chores. To my surprise, my mother-in-law didn't even look at me before saying, why did Rowan marry someone like her? She works, so all the household chores will fall on me. Is this what a wife should be doing? Normally, a wife would handle both work and home duties, wouldn't she? Her words were shocking and hurtful. She made sure I heard her loud and clear before walking away. I felt uneasy about what our life together would be like. As we were sorting through our belongings, Quinn suddenly appeared at the doorway and commented, I found myself dealing with a less than pleasant sister-in-law. Poor Rowan, I thought. Quinn quickly left after our initial meeting, and I was left feeling frustrated. First, my mother-in-law, and now Quinn, why were they willing to live with me when they spoke so poorly about me? It soon became clear that their interest in living with me was more about my money than anything else. On our first day living together, I noticed some troubling behavior. Despite their earlier sarcastic comments, both my mother-in-law and Quinn ignored me completely. They only prepared meals when Rowan was around and made no effort to help with cleaning or laundry. I tried several times to address their broken promises, but whenever I spoke to my mother-in-law respectfully, calling her ma'am, she would glare at me and walk away, clearly not interested in engaging. Quinn was a bit different, but still uncooperative. I found myself unable to confront either of them effectively. Over time, I got used to doing my own laundry and cleaning after returning from work. I wanted to talk to Rowan about it, but I hesitated out of sympathy for him. The situation worsened when they began facing financial issues. They started subtly pressuring me for more money, avoiding direct confrontation. They left notes under my food, like one I found today from my mother-in-law that said, "We're in a tight spot this month. Could you lend us $450? I thought about discussing this with Rowan, but he seemed financially strained himself due to social obligations and his drinking habits. He had trouble cutting back on expenses since we got married, despite my previous efforts to keep his spending in check when he was my subordinate. Now that he's in a new department, he finds it hard to turn down invitations, which has led to accumulating expenses. I found it difficult to bring up the financial demands with him, so reluctantly, I gave in to their request. For the past 1 year, this pattern of lending money to my in-laws continued without end. My husband became increasingly comfortable with not contributing to household expenses. He would often suggest cutting costs each month with a seeming indifference to our financial strain. I had gotten used to this routine, but I felt trapped in a never-ending cycle of schemes and manipulation. Despite all this, there was one thing I continued to do, but I'll explain that shortly. One day, after coming home from work, I was shocked to find a pile of my belongings scattered outside the house. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but upon closer inspection, I realized they were indeed my things. Furious at the sight of my belongings being treated so poorly, I tried to unlock the front door, only to discover that my key no longer worked. They had changed the locks while I was away. Frustrated and overwhelmed, I looked at my scattered items and wondered what to do next. Then I spotted another note lying among my belongings. It read, "Don't ever return. We don't want to see your face. Consider yourself lucky we didn't throw your stuff out." It was clear that my mother-in-law and Quinn were behind this cruel act. I wondered what Rowan had to say about all this, but by now, I didn't care. Thankfully, I had my car keys with me. I quickly gathered as many of my belongings as I could and loaded them into the car. With a heavy heart, but a sense of relief, I drove straight to my parents' house. I was relieved knowing that at least my things would be safe there and that my work wouldn't be interrupted. When I arrived at my parents' home the next day, they were visibly shocked but welcomed me back with open arms. It was comforting to be back in my childhood home, a place I hadn't visited much in the past 2 busy years. As I sipped the tea my mother had brewed and enjoyed the warmth of being surrounded by familiar faces, my father asked, "Why did you bring all your belongings here? Did you leave their house?" His question made me reflect on the past 2 years. My interactions with my mother-in-law and Quinn had been sparse, mostly limited to occasional reminder notes about money. Rowan had gradually become completely reliant on my income, and recently, it felt like he saw me as nothing more than a convenient source of cash. I had endured this situation for far too long, and now I was finally ready to confront the reality of my circumstances. When I shared my situation with my parents, they were incredibly understanding. "Maya, you've been patient for long enough," they said. "We won't ask you to endure anymore. Now that they've driven you away, there's no reason for you to go back. Perhaps you should think about sending Rowan a divorce notice." My parents were right. Although Rowan seemed like a decent young man when I married him, it was clear that money had changed him. It was a shame, but their genuine sympathy was a kindness I hadn't felt in the past 2 years. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized how much I had missed this level of compassion. "It's not that it's been so hard," I told my father, trying to explain. "It's just that I haven't experienced this kind of sympathy in a long time. It's comforting." "Yes, Dad," I agreed. "I will send Rowan the divorce papers. But I'd like to observe the situation a bit longer. I have a feeling something might happen soon." Indeed, that moment came about 5 months later. By then, I had moved out of my parents' home and settled into a new apartment. I never imagined how liberating it would be to have control over my own earnings and spend as I pleased. I hired a cleaning service to handle the chores, which allowed me to enjoy my days off with trips and purchases I had longed for. Each day reminded me of the value of my hard-earned money, and I began questioning why I had endured those 2 challenging years. It occurred to me that perhaps I had been influenced or manipulated by my in-laws. Then, exactly 5 months after the day my keys were changed and my belongings were thrown out, my smartphone buzzed with an unexpected call. At first, I considered ignoring it. But after dismissing the first call, my phone buzzed again, then a 3rd time in quick succession. I suspected something might be wrong, so I decided to answer. "Hello, Maya. Where are you?" It was my mother-in-law, someone who had ignored me for the past 2 years. Her voice, which I hadn't heard in a long time, sounded cautious. "I went to your parents' house, but they wouldn't tell me where you are. I also tried your workplace, but they wouldn't disclose your location." As I answered the call, another one came through almost immediately. I took a moment to relish the anticipation of what she might say next, knowing that this was going to be an interesting turn of events. The next day, my phone rang again. "Hello, Maya, are you there? Please come back soon and help us restore our lives. We can't even afford to go out and enjoy ourselves. What are we supposed to do now?" I thought that living without spending money on leisure would be enough, but it's clearly not the case. Our phone and electricity are about to be cut off. We're at our wits' end. Please come back immediately. It was clear to me that they were only thinking of themselves. Shouldn't they start with an apology for throwing me out? They seemed to completely miss that I had no intention of returning. I remained silent, feeling no obligation to respond. "Maya, are you listening at all?" My mother-in-law's voice continued, frustration evident. "Doesn't it bother you to hear that we're in such dire straits? We need your help." Realizing that an apology was not forthcoming, I decided to end the call. I pressed the button to hang up. They seemed to have no concept of remorse. The next day, my phone rang again. "Hello, Maya. Why did you ignore Mom's call yesterday? Even though we're in trouble, you didn't make any effort to help. It was hard to tell if you were even listening. Ignoring calls like that isn't very mature." It was Quinn this time. Calls from her had always been the most bothersome. Now she had the audacity to lecture me about not ignoring calls, even though she and her mother had ignored me for 2 years. I couldn't believe her nerve. I planned to endure the call a bit longer, but without an apology, I had no intention of engaging. "Listen," Quinn continued, "we're facing financial troubles at home. Our phone and electricity might get cut off soon. Without a sea, the heat could be dangerous. Can you live with that? If our phone dies, how will we reach you? So please, come back and help us pay the overdue bills." Her selfish demands made it easy for me to keep ignoring her. "Hey, are you listening? You haven't said a word. Oh, are you still upset about what happened 2 months ago?" That was obviously just a joke. "You're overreacting. As an adult, you should understand the difference between a joke and a serious matter. Stop being stubborn and come back home." I couldn't believe the nerve of them, asking for my help after treating me so poorly. They had thrown out my belongings like trash and changed the locks to keep me out. Their actions were a clear message for me not to return, no matter what they claimed now. It was hard to believe they had claimed everything was just a joke or prank, especially since Quinn showed no interest in apologizing either. I decided to end the call. It was clear it would be a waste of time to continue listening to her excuses. The next day, I finally received a call from Rowan. "Hello, Maya. I'm really sorry. My mother, my sister, and I all realize we've done terrible things. Can you come back? Our household is falling apart. We're out of money, everyone's on edge, and tensions are high. We sincerely apologize and want you back." Rowan seemed to feel the need to apologize, but it was too late for that. If he had reached out within the first few days, I might have considered returning, but it had been 4 months. I had embraced my new life and was enjoying every moment of my independence. There was no reason for me to go back to that family now. "I appreciate your apology, Rowan, but given everything that's happened, I have no intention of returning," I said. "Why were you unreachable for 2 months? How could you do that as a husband? I looked into things and found out you've been cheating, haven't you? That's what the detective agency told me. Thanks for treating me like an ATM for 2 years. I'll be sending divorce papers. Please handle it accordingly. Rowan seemed surprised, perhaps thinking he could avoid consequences. Yet he still had the nerve to ask me to come back. I responded, if you reimburse me for all the living expenses for the 3 of us over the past 2 years and repay the money I lent you, maybe I'd consider it. That's about $41,700. Can you manage that? I said this mockingly, fully aware he couldn't pay. After hearing my demands, Rowan fell silent and abruptly ended the call, likely realizing that my decision was final. When I sent the divorce papers along with a bill for emotional distress, Rowan signed the papers promptly. Now, all that's left is for me to file them at the city office to finalize the divorce. As for the compensation, Rowan transferred the money right away. I had included a note with the bill threatening to expose him to his company if he didn't pay promptly. Fearful of this, Rowan probably sought a loan to cover the amount. I heard that their family home is now on the market. It seems they're struggling financially and trying to raise funds quickly. Selling their primary residence hastily means they'll need to rent elsewhere. Given the cost of rent and utilities, selling the house might not have been the best decision. They were likely driven by an immediate need for cash without considering the long-term consequences. Whatever happens to that family is no longer my concern. As for me, I am thoroughly enjoying my single life. I've had my fill of marriage. Moving forward, I plan to work hard and savor my personal life, embracing my independence fully.